a college student with a bright future.
He was a journalism and history major who planned to go to law school.
He had a huge social group. He was very well liked.
Is found murdered in the middle of town.
The wound was so deep, the blade of the knife nicked the spine,
sending police hunting for an elusive killer.
This case was a true mystery, a true whodunit.
He was depicted as a promiscuous young man who could have been killed by anybody.
And when they catch him, it leaves everyone blindsided.
They did not want to believe this was true.
And that was pretty surprising.
When we figured out who did it, I refused to believe it.
Columbia, Missouri is best known as the home of the University of Missouri.
I think many people would consider us a college town. This is a city, small city with 30,000 students, coming in.
For the Columbia Police Department, a neighborhood of rowdy kids is usually as bad as it gets.
Mainly a lot of college-related crimes, such as the parties and alcohol offenses. Homicides in general were unheard of.
That all changes one afternoon in June 2004.
I received a call that someone had found a body in the East Campus area, and because I'm the East District Commander, I headed towards the scene.
Schwartz arrives to find a team of officers already securing the area.
The body was in between two apartments, lying face up, and he only had boxer shorts on. His throat had been slit, most probably with a knife. It was a very large and gaping wound. It was very deep. There's a few other abrasions on the upper body. So it was a very violent action, just a very violent crime.
I was a student in college, and seeing this in a place I knew really well was tough.
The forensics team processes the scene while police search the area carefully, but they can't locate a murder weapon or ID on the body.
We started talking with people in the area to see if anyone knew this particular person.
This was a part of town where everybody really knows everybody else. Everybody knows everybody else's business.
One onlooker thinks they recognize the dead young man.
The body was identified as Jesse Valencia. He was a young man attending the University of Missouri, and we found out that he lived in the neighborhood, block and a half from where we found his body.
The 23-year-old lived alone in an apartment just off campus. Police need to know if that's where the crime got its start.
We opened it up and started to look for any initial type evidence, trying to figure out who could have done this and for what reason.
The forensic team does a thorough sweep of the apartment, bagging Jesse's cell phone, cigarettes, and other items, while police canvass neighbors to see if they noticed anything suspicious the night before.
His neighbor admitted coming home drunk about 3 in the morning and going to bed. He was awakened by yelling that was going on next door. This neighbor actually pounded on the door and then went back to sleep.
The neighbor recalls that the shouting was late, almost 4 o'clock in the morning. Police are curious who was in the apartment with Jesse and what could they have been arguing about.
That obviously started to help us narrow down the time frame of when this may have occurred, but that's all we had to work with at that point.
There were no real clues as to who had murdered this young man.
A few hours into the investigation, another young man arrives at the scene in a flood of tears.
This guy named Jack Barry told investigators he was Jesse's former boyfriend who just lived a few blocks away. A friend had called Jack Barry saying that Jesse was dead.
If he had a relationship with Jesse Valencia, he was definitely a person the detectives wanted to talk to.
Jack agrees to come down to the station for routine questioning. But first, he helps detectives track down Jesse's family in Kentucky.
They called me on the phone, and a detective told me that Jesse had been killed, and I pretty much just took off running through the house and ran out my front door screaming. Just too much. Even when he was a little boy, Jesse never had trouble making friends. Everybody wanted to be around him because he was constantly smiling, laughing, and Jesse told me he was gay when he was 10 years old. He started crying, he got pretty emotional, and he said that he was afraid that I was going to hate him. And I told him that there was nothing in the world that could make me hate him. After that, he seemed pretty comfortable with himself.
As a teen, Jesse's confidence bloomed.
Jesse loved to talk. He loved meeting new people, making new friends. When he was in high school, he wanted to try modeling. He did really well at it, and I always thought that he wouldn't go back to school, but a year from the date that he told us that he wanted to be a model, he said he wanted to be a lawyer. That's what he decided to do, and that's why he went to Missouri.
Linda said he was a journalism and history major who planned to go to law school.
Jesse Valencia was one of those larger-than-life characters. He had such a big personality. He had a lot of friends. He had a huge social group.
Now, detectives need to find out who cut Jesse's life short in such a horrific way. They start by asking Jack Barry about his relationship with Jesse.
Jack told them he and Jesse had just split up, and he was trying to make Jesse realize it's over. I need to move on. Jesse still loved Jack, so he was having a hard time letting go. But Jack was already starting to see someone else.
Was it a fight with a spurned lover that the neighbor had heard in the middle of the night?
It was possible Jack had some type of confrontation with Jesse that led to his death.
And when investigators asked Jack for an alibi, it turns out that he doesn't seem to have one.
His alibi was, I was home sleeping alone. At that point, Jack Barry had become the primary suspect.
Coming up, detectives discover a secret romance
They had started a relationship very quickly.
that uncovers a killer's trail
A lie is the next best thing to a confession.
to a surprising culprit.
It was shocking on many levels.
Detectives in Columbia, Missouri are questioning a man who had recently split up with murdered college student Jesse Valencia.
Jack Barry wanted to end the relationship. He wasn't happy with the relationship any longer.
Jack paints a picture of a couple growing apart after 2 years of dating. But a piece of evidence found at Jesse's apartment makes detectives question his story.
The investigating detectives found Jesse's cell phone, and the cell phone showed that Jesse had called Jack Berry at about 3:18 that night.
The neighbors had heard some type of argument from the victim's apartment, approximately the time frame of when this occurred. So that would be obviously suspicious.
But Jack insists he was nowhere near Jesse's apartment.
Jack said that he had already gone to bed that night and that he heard a knock on his door at 3:18 in the morning, and then he simultaneously got a phone call from Jesse's cell phone. It was routine that Jesse would use his cell phone as sort of a doorbell. Jack said he was tired and he really didn't feel like getting up and talking to his former boyfriend at 3:18 in the morning, so he didn't go to the door.
Jack says he rolled over and went back to sleep, but police aren't so sure and question him for hours.
Finally, Jack broke into tears, and he said he regretted that. He didn't go to the door because what happened might not have happened had he done that. His reaction was so genuine, and it was clear that Jack still had a lot of love and affection for Jesse.
And it's becoming clear to detectives that Jack didn't kill Jesse, but they press him to see if he might know who did.
Jack said that he had no clue as to what would have happened to him and why anyone would have killed him.
23-year-old Jesse Valencia, the MU student.
Police found Valencia's body on East Campus, throat slashed.
As the story of the murder hits the 11 o'clock news, it sends shockwaves through the city.
I would say this was probably one of the most gruesome killings in Columbia. We don't have very many murders here.
The murder of a gay young man just a week before the city's first Pride Fest horrifies the progressive college community.
For anyone who thinks that they can get away with something like this so heinous is just unthinkable. We know from past homicides that a majority of them are with people that they know. Anyone who had had contact with him, whether in a sexual relationship or a social relationship, the detectives wanted to talk to.
Police begin to make the rounds of Jesse's wide circle of friends, wondering if there's anyone in his life that might have harbored any kind of grudge. One name they hear over and over is Zev Feintuck, a student that Jesse had met 2 weeks earlier at a political rally.
Jesse's friends had said, oh, maybe it was this guy because he didn't seem quite normal. There was something that made him a little bit different from other people.
Several of Jesse's friends, they said that Zev wasn't comfortable in his own skin and that he had a lot of issues with being himself. There was some contention whether Zev and Jesse were having a romantic relationship. They were spending a lot of time together.
Rumors about the two young men had been swirling, and after Jesse was murdered, the gossip about Zev began to take a sinister tone.
Somebody saw someone matching his description, looking disheveled and crying, walking down the street the morning of the murder, and a car he was known to drive was seen in that area.
That's when the detectives started looking towards him and started talking with him and seeing what he had to say.
Detectives call Zev down to the station, but he denies that the rumors about him and Jesse are true.
Zev said they'd never had a sexual relationship, but they were friends. Then Zev would come over and he'd hang out with him.
Police questioned Zev about where he was between 3 and 5 a.m.
His alibi was, I was home sleeping. He was a young man who still lived with his parents.
They subject Zev to a voice stress analysis test to see if he is telling the truth.
It showed untruthful, so deceitful. That did seem to be some evidence of guilt.
Detectives quickly follow up with a visit to his parents, but they confirm that their son was home all night.
Zev's parents had said that when Zev would leave, he would always go through the garage door to get to the car, and so it made a big racket They would have awakened his parents, and they said there's no way that he would have left that night. It seemed like he did have an alibi.
With Zev Feintuck discounted as a suspect, detectives continue to piece together the last hours of Jesse Valencia's life.
The detectives were talking with several of the friends of Jesse Valencia to see where he was on the evening and early morning hours that this occurred.
Police learned that Jesse had gone to a party at a friend's house around 11 p.m. on the night he was killed.
Some friends of Jesse said that Friday night, Jesse was at a party with a young man named Ed McDevitt.
Ed McDevitt was somebody Jesse had just met. Ed was a chef in town. They had met just a couple of nights before and had started a relationship very quickly.
Jesse's friends tell police that the two men left the party together, heading in the direction of Jesse's house.
And that was around 3 o'clock in the morning on the last night of Jesse's life.
It appears as though Ed McDevitt might have been the last person to see Jesse alive.
And it was possible Ed McDevitt went home with Jesse and then killed him.
12 hours after finding Jesse Valencia's body, detectives track down 22-year-old Ed McDevitt and bring him down to the station.
Jesse had met Ed McDevitt 2 days before his death and invited Ed to come home with him on that Friday night, the last night of Jesse's life, so he became a suspect at that point.
But Ed claims that he and Jesse went their separate ways soon after they left the party.
And he was talking with Jesse on the phone at the time he was walking home on the last night of Jesse's life.
Ed says that his roommate was up when he arrived home and invites detectives over to talk to him themselves.
There's nothing found when they search his home, and everything Ed McDevitt told the officers, they could verify by looking at his cell phone records, by talking to his roommate, and at that point, investigators let him go.
Police hope the DNA results pending at the lab will help them link one of their suspects to Jesse's murder. Desperate for answers, Jesse's mom grows more despondent, recalling an eerie premonition Jesse had years ago.
From the time Jesse was 7 years old, he had told me that he was going to die at a young age. He said, "I'm going to die at a young age, and I love all of you, and I always will love you, but I'll be okay." He would always end it with, "I'll be okay." And of course I got emotional and upset over it, but he said, "We've got to make the most of what time I'm here."
A day after Jesse's murder, detectives receive the autopsy report and study it closely for clues.
The medical examiner concluded that Jesse had been murdered in the area of 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. The cut to his neck was the only knife wound, and it was the cause of death. And it was so deep, the blade of the knife had also nicked the spine.
The lack of defense wounds suggests that Jesse had been taken by surprise.
The most mysterious thing was that across his breastbone there were bruises, and in the middle of his back between his shoulder blade there were bruises.
The evidence suggests that Jesse was easily overpowered in the vicious attack. Investigators hope that additional lab work will reveal even more and point to a killer.
There were fingernail scrapings collected during the autopsy, and also some hairs were found on his chest, and that was sent to the crime lab for analysis.
Until the crime lab turns up DNA, Police have no choice but to move on to their next lead.
A lot of Jesse's friends were being brought in, they were giving evidence, they were helping out with information.
One of those friends is a fellow student named Andy.
Andy Schermerhorn was a young man who had what they called a friends with benefits arrangement with Jesse.
Andy was out of town the night Jesse was killed. But the day after the murder, he comes forward to share a shocking story.
Andy Schermerhorn told the investigating detectives that Jesse was having sex with a Columbia police officer.
He was having a relationship with an officer. I was surprised.
Andy nervously reveals an encounter 3 weeks prior at Jesse's apartment.
Andy Schermerhorn said that on May 14th, he had been at Jesse's home at night, and there was a knock at the door. And Jesse went to the door, and a uniformed police officer was there. And Jesse said, "It's okay, oh, it's okay, he's cool, he's cool."
According to Andy, the officer took off his gun belt, and the next thing Andy knew, the three of them were fooling around.
After it was over, the police officer said, "This has got to be a secret."
A secret affair between an officer and a murder victim is a major red flag.
If any one of our officers had been seeing Jesse Valencia, why is he not being forthcoming? If you have nothing to hide, why not just tell us?
Detectives need to know who this officer is.
They said, "Do you think you'd be able to recognize him if you saw him again?" And he said yes, because it had only been about 2 weeks since that incident.
Detectives ask Andy if he'll look through a book containing the photo of every officer in the Columbia Police Department.
They were having him walk down the hall where he was going to look at the yearbook. Andy Schermerhorn flipped through it without even looking at the pages, closed it, and Schermerhorn began trembling, and he said, "I passed him in the hallway just now. It was him."
The day after the murder of Jesse Valencia, detectives in Columbia, Missouri learned that he was allegedly having a relationship with a local police officer.
Jesse's friend Andy Schermerhorn told the investigating detectives that he was an eyewitness to this sexual activity. Schermerhorn began trembling, and he said, "It was him that I passed in the hallway just now." And that was Stephen Arthur Rios.
Stephen Rios' commander believes Andy must be mistaken about the officer's identity.
When the detectives told me that maybe Steve had been having a relationship with the victim, I told the detectives, "You're absolutely wrong. He was married to a wonderful young lady, and they had just had their first child."
Schwartz knows the 27-year-old Rios well. The 5-year veteran is one of the department's rising young stars.
Steve was very outgoing. He communicated well, very ambitious.
He was a young officer who was on his way up in the department because he was a go-getter and a very popular officer.
Detectives don't know if Andy is telling the truth, but they're certainly anxious to get Rios' side of the story.
If he was having a relationship, that does not mean that he had killed Jesse Valencia.
Rios is out of town for a couple of days on a camping trip with coworkers. So they begin tracing Rios' steps the day Jesse's body was found.
He went in for his work shift later in the afternoon, like he normally did, and at that point, the body had been found.
The sergeant on duty that day had told me that Rios was coming to the scene to help identify the body. He had contacted the on-duty sergeant, but said he could help.
Rios said that I met Jesse Valencia when I gave him a ticket back on April 18th.
Investigators pull a copy of the incident report to see if it backs up Rios' story.
April 18th of 2004, some friends of Jesse's were having a party, and the party kept getting loud, and the police showed up to get them to quiet down. And Jesse, this intelligent pre-law major, said, "What's your probable cause?" Well, that got him arrested, and Stephen Rios gave him a municipal court summons for obstructing a governmental operation.
A call to Jesse's mother corroborates the report.
Jesse told me that when he was arrested, that the cop that drove him down to the jail was really nice, and that he talked to him all the way down to the station. And he said, I kind of felt a little bit uncomfortable because he kept asking me personal questions about my life that I didn't really feel like he should be asking me when he was trying to arrest me for something.
But the arrest wasn't the end of the officer's interest. The very next day, he turned up at Jesse's apartment.
After he got arrested, Jesse called me on the phone and he said, the cop that arrested me last night showed up on my doorstep. He said he had to ask me some more questions, but the questions he was asking Jesse were more of a personal nature. They went out a few times after that, and he would come to Jesse's apartment and just show up unannounced, even when he was in uniform.
Linda doesn't know much more than that, but thinks that Jesse's friend Joan Sheridan might. When they track her down 2 days after the murder, Joan confirms that Jesse saw the officer more than once after the arrest.
He had told her that the officer would typically come by sometime after 3 o'clock and before 6 o'clock in the morning, just for sex, and then leave.
Joan reveals that she got a close-up look at the officer one night when he showed up at Jesse's place.
They showed her a photo lineup, and she was able to pick the person that came by to Jesse's apartment that night. And it was Stephen Rios.
Detectives now have more evidence that Rios was having a scandalous relationship with Jesse. And when they hear what Joan says next, they suspect he may also have a motive for murder.
Joan said that when he went to court for his municipal court summons, Jesse assumed it would be dismissed since he was having sex with the arresting officer, and it had not been dismissed, and that had angered Jesse. So Jesse had told Joan that the next time the police officer comes over, I'm going to tell him that I have a little secret the chief of police might want to know if he doesn't get that ticket dismissed.
The detectives called me and told me that Jesse was threatening to contact the chief and expose Rios. Finally, the light bulb went off. You start looking at who had a motive to kill Jesse Valencia. Rios was very worried about his job. He was very worried about his reputation. He would be very devastated. He would be embarrassed by this information coming out.
That's when Rios became the suspect.
It's a serious matter to accuse one of their own. Investigators quickly regroup to plan the best approach.
They didn't feel they were ready to interview him yet. They were wanting to have the DNA evidence come back before they actually confronted him. But all of a sudden, Rios showed up at the police department and said, could I talk to you for a second?
He had this look on his face, like he was very upset. Very upset.
Coming up, detectives get a devastating phone call.
Steve called me, crying, very upset, and he said, I've done a bad thing.
And the investigation takes an unexpected new turn.
The officers found him on the 4th floor of a parking garage.
What was he thinking?
Detectives investigating the murder of college student Jesse Valencia are preparing to confront their suspect, police officer Stephen Rios. But Rios goes on the offensive first.
Rios said he was hearing from other people that Jesse was having an affair with a Columbia police officer. And I just wanted you to know that I did give him a ticket, but that's the only contact I had with him, and it's certainly not me.
But detectives tell him flat out that they've heard a different story.
They said, we've talked to a woman who said that she was at Jesse's apartment one night when you showed up. Rios sat there for a minute. And then Rios said, well, you know what, we did become social friends, but it never became anything like a sexual relationship. They said, you know, we've talked to another young man who says he was actually having sex with Jesse, and you came by that night and actually came in and joined them on the bed. And Rios said, what, sex? Like it was the most astounding and false accusation you could ever heard.
He was getting very agitated with the detectives. He's a very prideful person, and he was very upset because they didn't believe him.
It's easy to see that Rios is lying. Detectives bear down hard. And finally, their suspect breaks.
Finally, Rios admitted that he had sex with Jesse. He tried to claim it was just that one time, and then it evolved into that he had had sex with Jesse as many as 6 times.
It's a stunning admission and a strong motive for murder.
He was embarrassed. He obviously did not want this information out if he was keeping it secret to begin with, especially from his wife, you know, in his family.
Police may not have the physical evidence to prove that Rios is a killer, but they do have something that's almost as good.
We were able to prove that he was lying.
There's an old saying in law enforcement that a lie, a provable lie, is the next best thing to a confession. And Stephen Rios was caught in lots of provable lies.
But detectives aren't finished interrogating their suspect. They ask for his whereabouts the night that Jesse was killed.
He said he had been at work and he got off at 3 o'clock in the morning like he normally did. And he said that that night he'd gone onto the rooftop of the parking garage with a few other officers, and they had drank a few beers before they went home. And he said he got home about 5:15 to 5:30, took a shower, and got in bed.
Detectives grill Rios for over 3 hours, looking for any cracks in his story.
He still maintained he'd had nothing to do with Jesse's death. At that point, investigators let him go. He was definitely a suspect, but the question remained, can we prove it beyond a reasonable doubt?
Investigators' next step is to create a timeline for the night of Jesse's murder and see how Rios' alibi fits in.
His wife corroborated that he had gotten home in that 5:15 to 5:30 time frame.
Other officers confirm Rios worked until 3 a.m. and then had some drinks with them on the rooftop that night. The security door records reveal that Rios left the roof at 4:37 a.m., 45 minutes before he got home.
One of the detectives actually drove from the parking garage to Jesse's home the same time of night, and it was 3.5 minutes. He then drove from the scene of the murder to Rios' home, and it was 10 minutes.
This gave a window of time of 20 to 30 minutes that were potentially unaccounted for at the time that Jesse Valencia was apparently killed.
And this gave us a timeline that could show that Rios could have done this murder within that time.
Investigators search Rios' home, car, and work locker, but they uncover nothing to tie him to the crime. Then, out of the blue, Captain Schwartz receives an alarming phone call.
Steve called me crying, very upset, and he said, "I've done a bad thing." The first question I asked him was, "Where are you?" And he said that he was in Kansas City and that he had bought a shotgun. I really thought he was going to kill himself. And my first reaction was no. I said, "You need to just stop what you're doing. Just come back. Just come back to Columbia and we'll get through it."
Captain Schwartz is able to talk Rios into driving the 150 miles back home, where police take him into custody.
Still wasn't under arrest, but he was put on a 96-hour hold for an involuntary commitment to a mental facility, just for observation to make sure that he wouldn't kill himself.
But Stephen Rios is still despondent. He manages to evade hospital security, and soon the entire Columbia police force is on alert.
I got a phone call that Steve had escaped and was on top of the parking garage, threatening suicide.
One of the officers found him on the 4th floor of a parking garage, and Rios climbed up on the wall, claiming he was going to jump.
When they called me and said he's on top of the garage, he's threatening suicide, what was he doing? What was he thinking?
Suspect in the murder of Jesse Valencia has escaped protective custody and is threatening to lead to his death.
This is one of the busiest parts of campus. It's about 7 o'clock at night. He goes to the roof of the parking garage, starts threatening to jump.
There's a crowd below. There are people watching this. People are videotaping this, taking pictures. It's bizarre.
Police arrive on the scene to try to talk Rios off the ledge.
All I could think of was, here we go again. Why are you putting everyone through this? It was just putting everyone through a nightmare.
After a tense 45-minute standoff, they finally managed to talk Rios back from the brink.
He was taken back into custody and again put into a mental facility and put on a suicide watch while we were finishing our investigation to determine whether or not he would be charged with Jesse's murder.
3 weeks after Jesse's murder, the analysis of the hairs found on Jesse's chest give police the evidence they need to charge Rios with the crime.
They were able to say the persons who left those hairs on Jesse's chest, limb hairs that would have come from somebody's arm, those hairs matched to Stephen Rios. And that's when we realized that they teach Columbia police officers at the training academy how to administer a chokehold, and that cuts off the blood flow to the brain and renders a person unconscious in 3 to 8 seconds. That could account for these limb hairs in addition to the bruises that went across the front of his chest and in the middle of his back.
On July 1st, 26 days after Jesse Valencia's body was found, Stephen Arthur Rios is arrested and charged with first-degree murder.
Did you kill Jesse Valencia?
No, I did not.
During the week-long trial, prosecutors lay out their theory of how the murder went down.
Rios came by after his shift was over, thinking they were going to have sex. Jesse confronted him.
Jesse was threatening to contact the chief and expose Rios.
And he knew his career and his happy marriage would probably be over. And that had angered Rios. The neighbor heard this argument going on, and Jesse's yelling, "Stop it, stop it." Jesse then, clad only in his shorts and barefoot, ran out. being chased by Stephen Rios? The Stephen Rios caught him from behind and choked him into unconsciousness, put him on the ground, cut his throat, and that's what I believe happened in the last minutes of Jesse Valencia's life.
Prosecutors know they have a strong case, but convincing a jury that a police officer is a murderer is sure to be a hard sell.
If even one of the 12 jurors feels like it's not the person, then you have a hung jury or a not guilty verdict.
After 8 long hours, the jury returns with a verdict.
The jury finds the defendant, Stephen Arthur Rios, guilty of murder in the second degree.
I did feel a great sense of relief and even pride when the case was over and Stephen Rios had not gotten away with murder.
Stephen Arthur Rios receives a sentence of life in prison for the slaying of Jesse Valencia.
I don't feel like that Jesse really got justice because I wanted the death penalty for him. He took my whole life away from me.
Anytime you have an officer who has done a heinous type act like this and taken someone's life, it is a huge stain. And for law enforcement everywhere.
For Jesse's mother, her son's legacy is in the way he lived his life, not the way it ended.
I want people to remember the
Tonight, hear the stunning new legal twist as a witness admits he lied on the stand in a grisly kidnapping case.
For the first time tonight, you're going to see a startling tape. Could it free a man who's now behind bars? 2020 begins right now.
Somebody has my daughter. They have kidnapped her. Please get everybody in the community out there.
Everybody trying to say, it's okay, Karen, this is all just a mistake. But see, they didn't know what I knew that morning.
Nursing student Holly Bobo, last seen being dragged away from her home by a man in camouflage.
He said, stop, 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 leave me alone, stop. But she never called out his name.
Just hours after Holly Bobo disappeared, more than 400 people turned up here to search these woods.
Holly, I love you so much. Please try to get home to us.
I just remember it was madness. Cops everywhere, helicopters flying. It was already crazy.
We were looking at everybody. Everybody was looked at.
When did someone kind of pull away from the rest?
He said if somebody like him had got Holly, she's just a toy to him. And it's all fantasy world.
Dennis Benjamin says, there's a man on my porch who has just confessed to the kidnapping of Holly Bobo.
Do you think the jury got this one wrong?
Absolutely. Yep. Innocent people are in prison.
Please, please help us find her.
This is the Tennessee River. On its western bank is Decatur County, a patchwork of sparsely populated farms, dense woods, and neighbors who look out for each other.
It's a rural county with a cute little small town, Parsons. Very close to the Tennessee River.
A lot of cattle farming and crop farming.
Hunting, fishing, boating.
People that like to live out in the country, they have some animals or some horses.
There's not a lot of industry in Decatur County.
I started to say it might be compared to Mayberry, but it's nothing like that. We do have crime just like every other town in America, but we are rural. Everybody pretty much knows everybody. Everybody knew Holly and her family.
20-year-old Holly Bobo came from a loving family. She lived with her mother, Karen, father, Dana, and her older brother, 25-year-old Clint, in a home her dad built with his own hands.
It was your typical little single story, 3 bedrooms, kitchen was in the middle kind of, and then a little small living room. And they had a carport there, which is a 2-car carport to the back of the house.
They're typical middle-class, hard-working country folks. Holly's dad, he had an excavating business, and her mother was a school teacher.
Holly and I were very close, and we were about 5 years apart.
Holly was raised like my little sister, and Clint was like my little brother. We were always growing up together.
We just lived in our own world. 2 kids in college. We had our church family, our family gatherings, went to the movies together, rode 4-wheelers together, rode horses.
The Bobo kids grew up with a sense of caring for their community. Clint is studying to become a social worker, and Holly is attending nursing school.
They're the best people on earth. That's what hurt so bad, that this happened to them. They didn't do anything that would have put them in harm's way of having this to happen. It just doesn't happen to people like them.
It was just a normal morning like anything else. Dana gets up first and gets ready.
Well, I usually go out and feed the dogs.
Dana says Holly is already up, studying for a big test later that day.
I asked her if she needed any money, I think, for gas or whatever that day. She said, yeah, and I left her some money on the bar. I left out my regular time, 5:30 or something like that, and went on to work.
Karen wakes up a short time later.
So I went on about my business, getting ready. I'd packed her lunch like I always did. She was sitting at the kitchen table studying, and I kissed her goodbye and told her I loved her, just like every other morning. And I left.
Around 7:45, a neighbor was getting ready to go to work. He heard a scream from next door.
She said, stop, 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 leave me alone, stop, but she never called out his name.
It made such an impression on him. He told his mother that he heard somebody screaming over at the Bobo's house.
That neighbor calls Karen Bobo at work, worried, saying, "We heard a scream coming from your house."
That's just not a call you get every day, so I instantly knew something was wrong.
Holly's brother Clint, who is asleep in the house, doesn't hear the scream, but he wakes up to the family dog, Rascal, barking.
He just continued to bark, so I decided to get up, to see what he was barking at. As I was approaching that window, I heard people talking, voices. I could tell it was a male and a female voice. I never was able to really tell what they were saying.
There's a side window next to the kitchen that faces the carport, which of course is an open carport.
Clint looks into the carport. He sees Holly and another person kneeled down in a catcher stance.
So I could see enough to tell that it was Holly and a man in camouflage who I identified as Drew, who is her boyfriend.
At first he thought it was Holly and her boyfriend and they were arguing. He didn't want to get involved in it, so he stepped away and let them do whatever they were doing. At that point, he sent his mom a text and asked, does Holly not have school today?
And I said, well, her and Drew are out here in the garage. I expected Drew to be dressed in camouflage because Drew and I had talked the night before, and he told me he was going turkey hunting that morning.
But there were some things that Clint didn't know that his mother knew. Drew was at least 30 minutes drive away.
Drew was hunting on my mom's property in southern Decatur County.
Right away, her instincts told her that's terribly wrong.
I would say like 20 seconds later, I received a phone call from her. She says, call all the neighbors. Oh my God, Clint, that's not Drew.
I said, that's not Drew, get a gun and shoot him.
Miss Karen is saying, shoot him, get your gun and shoot him. He's like, what are you talking about? You want me to shoot Drew? He just woke up. He wasn't comprehending everything that was going on.
And I said, so you want me to shoot Drew? And I think that's when she must have hung the phone up.
I just hung up, and I collapsed to the floor.
He said he went and got his gun, and he looked out the back window of the kitchen, and he saw that Holly was walking with a man in camouflage.
At that point is when I could see them. They were walking towards the woods, and there's a trail that Holly and I are both very familiar with. That trail leads you to a logging road. And they looked like they were walking right toward that trail. She was walking on her own. She didn't appear to be hurt, and still thinking it's Drew. And I'm watching them as they're walking toward this trail.
As Clint Bobo is watching his sister Holly and this man in camouflage disappear into the woods, back at work, Karen Bobo knows something is really wrong.
And everybody trying to say, it's okay, Karen, this is all just a mistake. But see, they didn't know what I knew that morning. It couldn't be Drew, and that the neighbor had heard a scream. And so my friend, she grabbed my hand, pulled me up, and we headed out of the building. She hands me her phone.
911, what's your emergency?
Somebody has my daughter. They have kidnapped her. And somebody in full camouflage got Holly. Please get everybody in the community out there.
They're on their way, sweetie. I got everybody on their way right now already.
Oh, my God.
In the hours and days that follow, thousands of people will come to this small town, all asking the same question. Where is Holly Bobo? A quiet spring morning in the country interrupted by a scream. Then, a deafening silence. 20-year-old Holly Bobo vanished from her own backyard, and her family is in anguish.
Holly was an absolute joy from the day she was born. It just seemed like there was something special about her. She was always kind to people and appreciated the small things in life.
Holly's mother says she shares a special bond with her only daughter.
We could finish each other's sentences. We enjoyed doing the same things, riding horses, listening to the radio.
Holly's cousin, country singer Whitney Duncan, says music has always been a passion for Holly.
We had singing in common for sure, and she had a beautiful voice. Peace in the Valley was her favorite gospel song. I have that clip and go back and watch it.
Following graduation from high school, Holly has her eye on the future, studying hard to become a nurse.
Holly and I ended up in the same nursing class in Parsons, and so I really got to know her. She was very committed to the program. You could just tell. She studied continuously. On the day that she went missing, we got to class, and we're supposed to take a test the first thing. The instructor went out and came back, and she announced that something terrible had happened. I'm sorry. And so we immediately dispersed, went to the area, started searching.
When tragedy strikes, Decatur County comes together. On April 13, 2011, just hours after Holly Bobo disappeared, more than 400 people turned up here to search these woods, trying to help find any clue as to what happened to the 20-year-old nursing student.
The search response was almost immediate. By 8:30, half the neighborhood was out there.
I've seen 800 people out here today. These guys here is going to be the team leaders.
Group 1 is this, so it'd be Group 2 that's down here.
By 10, half the county was there.
Holly, I love you so much. Please try to get home to us, and if anybody knows anything about her, please help us find her.
So when you first get there on the scene, what was it like there?
Everybody was involved trying to determine what happened to Holly Bobo. It was just a chaotic scene of following leads.
with hundreds of people involved.
Just anybody that can help, just come on and help us, please.
You know, Tennessee's known as the volunteer state, and that's what happened. Just about every county in half of Tennessee was there, from Memphis to beyond Nashville.
If you see anything that is not right, call me.
There are people on horseback, ATVs.
There were posters on telephone poles. There were posters throughout the county.
Pink ribbons and pictures of Holly Bobo are posted all over the small, tight-knit community of Parsons.
So it becomes a pretty big story right away.
Is everybody ready?
It grew exponentially.
We want to just bring everybody up to speed.
When the days went on and there was no more signs of Holly.
Got a lot of ground left to cover still.
First, you had the local stations.
It's been almost a week since Holly was last seen outside her family's home.
From Jackson, from Decatur County, from Nashville and Memphis coming in. And then you had the national people coming in.
And now we have the latest on the desperate hunt for Tennessee nursing student Holly Bobo.
Last seen being dragged away from her home by a man in camouflage.
We're going to begin with the urgent search for a young woman gone missing.
In addition to thousands of volunteers, law enforcement from across the country came to tiny Parsons to help in the search.
Decatur County Sheriff's Office, who responds with multiple deputies. They called in the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. The TBI came in with dozens of agents. They called in the U.S. Marshals and the FBI.
This was the biggest investigation in the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation history. That almost every agent in the whole Tennessee Bureau had some type of involvement in it.
This is where our virtual command center is. We've really been concentrating from Holly's house north up to I-40.
We're talking about a distance of about 8 miles?
Yes.
They brought in bloodhounds and so forth, and they tracked a set towards that bigger pond. They had divers, and they walked that pond, and they looked and they didn't find anything.
There were several times I took agents out in my patrol boat and looked at places on the river.
So I just remember it was madness. Cops everywhere, helicopters flying. It was already crazy. And for me, it was just surreal.
I just want her back.
Thank you.
While authorities focus on the search, the crime scene itself reveals very little in the way of physical evidence. A footprint and spots of blood in the carport where Clint last saw his sister.
There's 2 little steps that go into the carport. Her Mustang was parked in the first slot, and the blood was found right in front of it. One of them was about the size of a fist. The other ones were much smaller, maybe a quarter-sized or dime-sized.
And it was determined to be hers. The discovery of the blood obviously is disheartening. It indicates she's at least injured. She was at least bleeding when she was taken away.
The working theory? Whoever took Holly had to be familiar with the area and know the Bobo's schedule.
We feel that she knew that she was in fear of her life, so she was complying with his command.
It might have been somebody close, somebody that kind of knew our routine of when I left, when she left, and when my daughter left to go to school.
In our minds, besides the very few people we were the closest to, anybody could have been a suspect.
As the list of possible suspects grows, authorities begin to wonder if the abductor could be even closer to home than the Bobos realize.
There were a lot of people that felt them telling the truth would be the secret to solving this case.
It's been almost a week since Holly was last seen.
20-year-old nursing student who reportedly was abducted from her home a week ago today.
Abducted from her home 6 days ago.
Weeks after 20-year-old Holly Bobo is abducted from her home, investigators still don't know who took her. But thanks to cell phone tracking technology, they say they know where she was taken.
So you mapped out where you thought her cell phone went?
Yes.
So where do you think her phone went as she was leaving her home?
It went straight north.
Can we look at the map?
Absolutely. Okay. So they go north, about 32, 33 miles an hour, the red dotted area, and Then it travels this way.
Volunteers searching along the mapped-out route find some of Holly's personal items, including her cell phone.
We were going down the side of the road on each side of Highway 641, just kind of in the ditches, walking elbow to elbow. And we found the phone there.
They found her notebook, they found her lunchbox, they found her school papers, and that essentially followed the same path of the GPS tracking of her cell phone.
It's confirmation they are looking in the right place, but that doesn't make the search any easier.
The massive investigation has turned up nearly 300 new leads, but still no Holly. Volunteers say they don't plan on stopping until she is found.
It's just unbearable. I can't hardly imagine.
We are those people. We became those people that no one ever wants to be.
The Bobos are living a nightmare, and it's only about to get worse. Once viewed as victims, they're now being viewed as suspects.
Did she know her alleged abductor?
Yes, there were a lot of people that felt Clint was lying, felt very strongly that Clint was lying, and that Clint telling the truth would be the secret to solving this case.
I've heard countless times that if I would have been that, I mean, I'm talking, sometimes people said this to my face, you know, if I had been that brother, I would have went out there, you know, I would have done something. They just don't understand the way that this event played out.
The TBI, the FBI, and the U.S. Marshals interviewed Clint Bobo multiple times over several weeks, asking him over and over what he knows about his sister's disappearance.
Just question after question after question, and detail after detail, you know, just trying to pull any information they could out of me, which I understand is what they're supposed to do. I just wanted to be as helpful as I could, but I was willing to do whatever they asked me to do.
I interviewed Clint Bobo on several occasions, sometimes several hours at a time I spent with him, and I never, ever had Clint Bobo dishonest. I found him very trustworthy, and he never changed his story of what happened.
Clint's cell phone data backs up his story. He never left the Bobo home that morning.
The cell phone data, Holly was moving the whole time Clint's been here. The police were there at 8:10, and Holly's cell phone moved for another hour and 15 minutes. Clint couldn't have been involved in moving her, or somebody else would have had to have been involved too.
I just wish I had known more. I wish I had known that the neighbor called Mom at school. I wished I had known that the neighbor heard a scream. I wished I had known that Drew was turkey hunting. I didn't have the information that I needed.
It will take several years, but Clint is eventually cleared, as are all the Bobo family members and Holly's boyfriend, Drew Scott. Meanwhile, as the investigation is seemingly going nowhere, the Bobo family is increasingly frustrated.
Until your child is found or you know what happened to them, I don't think anyone could ever do enough in a parent's eyes.
There was all kinds of leads coming in. We were looking at everybody. Everybody was looked at.
When did someone kind of pull away from the rest?
There was a point in the investigation to where the FBI agent and Dicus, the TBI agent, come up with a suspect.
And who was that guy?
Terry Britt.
He spent the majority of his life in prison for kidnapping and rape.
He was on that list of local people that were sexual predators. And of course we ran his name. And Terry Britt, right away, he fit the description that Clint gave. He was about 5'10", 11.
I estimated him to be about 5'10" and about 200 pounds. I guess it was just assumed, you know, that he had black hair or dark brown. It just kind of blended in with this camouflage clothing.
Terry Britt fits the description. He knows the routes. He lives at the end of the route where stuff was thrown out. And he has a strong history in this kind of behavior.
According to Terry Dicus, Terry Britt did have, for lack of a better term, a type. He liked pretty blonde, blue-eyed girls, and Holly fit that type.
Agent Dicus wants to talk to Britt, and he has no trouble tracking him down. Britt is locked up on another charge. Dicus records the conversation with him.
How you doing?
Getting in there. While Britt says he has an alibi and denies having anything to do with Holly Bobo's abduction, he spoke hypothetically about who may have done it and why.
He said if somebody like him had got Holly, she's just a toy to him, and it's all fantasy world.
She's young, pretty, perfect, somewhat body.
Yeah.
Okay. like a toy, some people would think. See, this man, when he goes and gets this female, then he's going to go snatch her up. He can't wait to get her to wherever he's going to take her to, because he's wanting that body.
He's living in this fantasy. He's got this perfect girl, and he's got to get to that body as quick as he can. But as soon as he gets done, now reality sinks in.
Well, here comes reality. Now I've got a body. What am I going to do with it? Because if you keep it, you got to feed it.
Right.
You got to hide it. It ain't going to happen. And if you kill it, what you going to do with it? I mean, there's no way.
The first time I interviewed him, I was like, oh my God, this guy did it. This guy did it.
But the Bobo investigation is about to take a turn.
I've been hearing about these guys.
In the investigation, they were brought up early and often.
Is a new prime suspect about to take center stage?
He would tell people, you're going to end up in a hole just like Holly.
Months into their investigation, no arrests have been made, but TBI agent Terry Dykes is convinced he has his guy.
We conducted 1,000 interviews. We looked at 5 counties around. Terry Britt's the one. It's either this guy or we have no idea who. There were some disagreements, some very heated disagreements at the TBI. It was just the argument, you don't have enough proof for it. You can't prove that he did it. That's what I was faced with. And I was taken off the investigation.
With new TBI agents now taking the lead, they clear Terry Britt and go back to sifting through all those tips that have been gathered over the years.
As investigators dig into this case, a variety of possible suspects emerge, but one group of men well known to law enforcement becomes the focus of their investigation.
I've been hearing about these guys, that people are saying they're into all kinds of things, stealing things.
They were friends, 4 guys, Zach Adams, Dylan Adams, Jason Autry, and Shane Austin. All 4 were suspects separately.
Zach had criminal histories. Dylan had drug charges. Jason Autry had a history of theft and drug charges. Shane Austin admittedly had a drug problem. They all had that common link of having a criminal past.
Tell me about your son, Shane.
He was just the life of the party. He was just a fun person to be around. But he had a problem.
Between his 9th and 10th grade year of high school, he dislocated his shoulder playing football. I think the opioid stuff started after his first surgery. He wanted to not be addicted to drugs. He tried not to be addicted to drugs for a long time.
Jimmy and Rita Austin had given Shane a place to live, a little trailer to live in that was down the road from their family home.
Their last names all started with A, and the locals referred to them as the A train. They were known for getting in trouble.
In the investigation, they were brought up early and often by people that know that they're into drugs. Zach would tell people, you're going to end up in a hole just like Holly. Comments everywhere that normal people would not make.
And in the early days of the investigation, Holly's mother, Karen, thought these guys could know something, given what they had been heard saying around town. So she tracked them down herself.
I asked them, did they know anything about our daughter's abduction? Of course, they all denied it.
She was kind of doing her own investigation. I mean, she came here and asked to talk to Shane.
I guess I would have fought Goliath. You know, I just had no fear. I was trying to find my daughter.
And at the time of Holly's abduction, witnesses tell investigators that before she went missing, Shane Austin crossed paths with her at a local raccoon hunting festival.
The story was that Shane had seen Holly Bobo at the coon hunt and that he'd kind of followed her around like a stalker.
Did you hear anything about that?
I guess we heard that rumor. We heard that he was trying to take a picture of her and pretending like he was talking on the phone. But now Shane only had a flip phone, so I don't think you could hold that flip phone up to your head and take a picture of somebody, but that's what we heard.
Investigators followed up on this story. Within a week of Holly's disappearance, they showed up at the Austins' property wanting to speak with Shane.
They come and brought the dogs and come down and search Shane's trailer, and that was the start of it.
Throughout their investigation, authorities say they never found evidence at the Austins' property that connected him to Holly Bobo.
Were you surprised that they were down there?
Yes. I mean, I know Shane had drug issues, and that's what I told the TBI guy when he come to the gate down there. I said, hey, I said, if she'd been made of morphine, I'd said you come to the right place, but no way.
And then, 2 years later, with those new agents on the case, authorities zeroed back in on the Adams brothers, Jason Autry and Shane Austin.
At what point did you realize that he might be in trouble with all of this?
When they come back at 6 o'clock in the morning and tooting the horn, so we went down and opened the gate and let them in, and they said, we're down here to get this over with, so we want Shane.
That's when they wanted to know where the body was at. The TBI met with Shane and they got that immunity deal.
Investigators offered Shane immunity to cooperate and tell them what he knew about his friend's involvement in Holly Bobo's abduction.
You take an immunity deal, hey, you've done something. You've done something. But the lawyer said, if you don't do it, they're going to arrest him. They've done told me they're going to arrest him. And he said, it's going to cost thousands of dollars. So us three, we talked and we agreed. And
we talked hard.
We talked hard.
We talked hard. If you got any part of this, you better be telling it.
Shane Austin had nothing at all to do with this.
So Shane Austin takes the deal, but when he sits down with investigators, they're disappointed.
They was very unhappy because he didn't know where the body was at.
According to authorities, all he can tell them is that he too has heard Zach Adams make incriminating comments about what happened to Holly.
There was talk that Zach had blurted out, I'm going to do you like I did to Holly.
But Shane also said that he didn't believe that Zach was telling the truth. He thought that Zach was just boasting.
But investigators believe Shane knows more than he's telling, and they revoke that immunity deal.
I was scared for my son. If the TBI wasn't here, they was calling him, harassing him. So we didn't have any peace.
I don't know if it was them calling him or whatever, but anyway, his drug use just escalated, and that's from that, so. And Christmas was the last time we seen him.
Shane's parents say his life continued to spiral, and in 2015, he died by suicide.
Shane opened that door to addiction. They just grabbed him and pulled him in, and this time it pulled him in for real. Wasn't gonna let him go.
Authorities have lost one cooperating witness, but they're about to get a new one.
That's true. You ain't gonna be spared to nobody now. Ain't no reason to be spared to nobody.
Could what he has to say finally explain what happened to Holly Bobo? More than 2 years after Holly Bobo disappeared, investigators are still searching for answers. Rumors about 4 local small-time criminals, Zach Adams, his brother Dylan Adams, Jason Autry, and Shane Austin, have failed to lead to any hard evidence. But in 2014, investigators catch a break when Dylan Adams is arrested on unrelated gun charges.
When he was arrested this time, it was big. This guy that he had been hanging with was a convicted felon, and they had a couple guns on them, and drugs. So he got in trouble for having the firearms around a felon.
They had him in a federal holding facility up in northwest Tennessee.
While Dylan Adams is incarcerated on these gun charges, investigators speak with him at least 6 times over 8 months, and he seems to implicate his brother Zach and Jason Autry in the kidnapping and murder of Holly Bobo.
I had to go through the TBI to make sure my son was still alive, still safe, and you know, each time that I spoke with him, there was no indication that he was being interrogated. He has no concept of what is really going on.
Dylan's family says he has intellectual disabilities.
Dylan was slow. He really was.
Dylan would have a hard time completing a simple task. Maybe a little slow in reading, comprehending, things like that.
According to court documents, Dylan eventually pleads guilty to lesser federal charges and is released, but not into the custody of his mother. In fact, she says she couldn't even see him because of the conditions of his release.
I was told that I would not be able to contact him, or he would not be able to contact me. I think safe house was the word that they used, because Dylan was their key witness and he had to be protected. I had no idea where he was going.
As it turns out, prosecutors arranged for Dylan Adams to be released into the custody of a private citizen and former Memphis police officer named Dennis Benjamin.
Dennis Benjamin takes him back to his house for several weeks.
Is this normal for someone to be released into the custody of someone that they don't know that's a law enforcement person?
It's real strange, that's for sure.
We reached out to the prosecutor in that case about Dennis Benjamin's involvement, and they would not comment.
And while Dylan Adams is there, a huge break in the case, the moment the Bobo family had been dreading for years.
The 3-year and 5-month search for Holly had come to an end. 2 men searching for ginseng found her remains Sunday morning off a Country Corner Road in Holiday.
Holly's skull was found with a single gunshot. Among the remains, some of her schoolwork, her sandals, and her promise ring from her boyfriend, Drew Scott.
It was just a miracle she was found. Because to this day, as broken as my heart is so broken for those people that still don't have that, because I don't think I could have kept going.
And just weeks later, the Decatur County Sheriff's Office receives a shocking phone call. The caller is Dennis Benjamin, telling them that Dylan Adams, still in his custody, has just confessed to taking part in the kidnapping and murder of Holly Bobo.
Just have your seat right there if you don't mind.
Dylan Adams is brought in to speak with TBI agents, and through halting one-word answers, he tells them that he, Zach Adams, Jason Autry, and Shane Austin committed the crime together.
You came forward to Dennis and told him some things that are above and beyond what you've ever told me or Brent about this case, right? Yes, sir. Okay. Describe, what was she doing? What did she look like? What was she wearing? She had long pants on, pink shirt, things like that. Okay.
Dylan says that all 4 men sexually assaulted Holly at Zach's house.
And now you're saying that Shane Austin is sitting there. You're sitting there. Jason Autry is sitting there. And Zach. Is there anybody else involved? Was Holly Bobo kidnapped? Was she raped? Raped by you?
I just see someone being bullied into saying something they didn't do. I think that he was just trying to get through it.
You withheld information. That ain't how this works.
He was in a federal holding facility for almost 2 years. The TBI agents there pounded him, and he never, ever once said, I raped Holly. And then he's moved to this Dennis Benjamin's house, and suddenly he's raped Holly.
We attempted to contact Dennis Benjamin, but we were unable to reach him.
She was shot in the back of the head. How did that happen? How much blood was on the floor? What was ever done to clean that up?
As far as I know, just the rat. After her, I don't know.
Armed with Dylan's confession and a search warrant, investigators go to Zach Adams' house looking for any physical evidence to corroborate his story.
They come to the door there and asked me, said, you want to unlock it or you want us to tear the door down? And they knocked a hole in it to see what was back there, I reckon. Tore the fan down as they was tearing the floor out. They used my pick and things to tear this out with, but they cut it out with a saw.
And the story, he was raping her and attacking her in the house. Well, they pulled up floorboards, they DNA tested all the couch and the bed and everything, never found nothing.
We reached out to the TBI and they declined to answer specific questions about this case.
In my heart of hearts, I know my boys, they're drug addicts. They're not murderers.
But despite a lack of evidence, authorities believe that's exactly what they are. Zach Adams, Jason Autry, and Dylan Adams are eventually all indicted for murder.
Decatur County Grand Jury handed down indictment of especially aggravated kidnapping and first-degree felony murder.
With all three heading to trial, the state announces that it will seek the death penalty, and Jason Autry proclaims his innocence to anyone who will listen.
Innocent man falsely accused.
And tonight, for the first time, you'll hear from Zach Adams in his own words.
I have no need for that.
And the brand new development that Adams hopes may finally exonerate him.
If you don't play with him, you might as well go all the way, Jason.
All right, we're ready to continue.
A nursing student who was last seen being dragged away from her home by a man in camouflage.
Holly, I love you so much.
The Bobos are living a nightmare, and it's only about to get worse.
I know that my daughter begged for her life. Look at me, please. You have shown absolutely no remorse.
But is she saying that to someone who's innocent?
Why do you think you guys became suspects in this case? There were a lot of people at your trial that testified that you had made comments and that you had killed Holly Bobo.
I don't think they're capable of kidnapping a woman and keeping it secret for 2 years. I don't think they're capable of doing arithmetic.
Raise your right hand, please.
Did a key witness lie on the stand?
He said, I need you to help me bury this body. He said, that's Holly Bobo.
Now, video never seen before of that same crucial witness
If you don't play with him, you might as well go all the way.
changing his story.
So we went all the way.
What does he tell you?
Tells me he made the whole thing up.
Why would someone admit to killing someone if they didn't do it?
Circuit Court, Hardin County, Tennessee is now in session pursuant to adjournment. The Honorable C. Creed McGinley presiding. God bless the United States, the state of Tennessee, the county of Hardin, and this honorable court. You may be seated.
It's been 6 years since Holly Bobo was taken. 6 years since she died. Everybody, judge, jury, prosecution, defense, gathered inside this courthouse. It's September, but it's stuffy. The jurors are sweating, people fanning themselves in the Tennessee heat, and no one has a hotter seat than the defendant, Zach Adams.
He's charged with kidnapping, murdering, and raping Holly Bobo.
He could face the death penalty if convicted.
In this case, State of Tennessee versus Zachary Bryant Adams, State ready to proceed.
We are, Your Honor.
Defendant ready to proceed.
Yes, sir.
Zach Adams has put on a suit and a lot of weight. He is the only defendant in this trial. His friend Shane Austin died by suicide. Co-defendants Jason Autry and Dylan Adams expected to stand trial later.
Zach was the one that the state of Tennessee thought was the most culpable, so they chose to try him first.
Hello, this is a prepaid call from an inmate at the Tennessee Department of Corrections.
Hello.
Hey, Zach, this is Eva. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good.
Adams does not testify, but years later, he tells us his story in his first interview ever.
What do you say to all those people who think you're guilty?
Where's the evidence? There's not one single piece of evidence.
Did you think you were going to get off?
Well, I knew I was innocent. When you're innocent, it doesn't matter. You're thinking, yeah, of course you're thinking you're going to come home because you're innocent.
You took her, you raped her, killed her, you covered it up, you bragged about it, and you almost got away with it, but you didn't. Because we're here.
No. He did not murder Holly Lynn Bobo. He did not kidnap Holly Lynn Bobo. He did not abduct Holly Lynn Bobo. He did not rape Holly. And do you remember?
Karen Bobo knew the man, now accused of killing her daughter, when he was just a boy.
Did you know Zach Adams?
I had Zach in the 4th grade. I was his 4th grade school teacher.
The very first day, you have Holly's mother basically fall out on the stand during her testimony.
Take just a minute, I'm feeling sick.
Let's take a recess. I want everyone to remain with me while the jury files out, please. Oh, got a nurse.
Holly's father also testifies.
What day did you give up hope for the very first time?
And about 3 years into it, give or take, the TBI come to our house, told us that was Holly, that Holly had been found. That was her remains.
I'm going to ask you to look at this picture. You recognize it?
Prosecutors produced the alleged murder weapon. It's a .32 caliber revolver witnesses claim was owned by Zach Adams' friend, Shane Austin, and it was recovered in a drainage ditch just months before the trial.
We located a metal object that was later identified as a revolver.
A parade of no fewer than 9 witnesses testify that over the years, Adams, often while on drugs or in jail, made incriminating statements.
He said, "I'll kill you like I did Holly Bobo."
He made the comment, "I couldn't have picked a prettier bitch."
He just had a couple of his friends, you know, they got drunk and they went into the woods with this girl, and then he was like, you know, I was there for the worst of it. And I was like, well, did you do it? And he was like, I was there for the worst of it, and he just left it like that.
Somebody that would brag about that, my God, that's the devil's work. You don't do that.
Did you say those things?
My life used to revolve around drugs and selling drugs and stuff, so if I could get people intimidated or make them think that, you know, fear me or whatever, so I said things that I shouldn't have said, but I never directly said I did this to Holly.
The prosecution and defense each call a cell phone expert. Both agree Adams and the other suspects' phones did not hit cell towers near the Bobo home at the time Holly was taken.
At the time of this abduction, do we have any idea where Zach Adams' phone is, where Shane Austin's phone is, where Dylan Adams' phone is, or where Jason Autry's phone is?
No.
The prosecution expert says it's possible Holly and Zach Adams' phones were in the same general locations later that morning, but the defense expert disagrees.
In very general terms, the devices were not together at the same location at the same time during that morning.
Did you kill Holly Bobo?
Absolutely not.
Why do you think you guys became suspects in this case?
We didn't have a hard alibi, and we was local, you know, drug users and stuff, and would it matter putting us away? I felt like they had to arrest somebody, even if it was the wrong person, which it was.
As the trial continues, astonishing testimony. A witness you might think would be the last person to believe Adams is innocent.
I looked at Zach personally a total of 2 or 3 times. Whenever the last one was over with, I stopped looking at him.
And a stunning courtroom appearance. That former suspect with a theory of what Holly's killer was thinking.
You gotta hide it, and if you kill it, what you gonna do with it?
Terry Britt, the man investigators say they cleared, is about to take the stand.
All right, we're ready to continue. Defense ready to proceed?
Yes,
State ready to proceed?
Yes, sir.
All right, call your next.
Terry Dykes.
The prosecution of Zach Adams for the murder of Holly Bobo, not surprisingly, features plenty of law enforcement witnesses. That's standard.
What is unusual, the defense calls 6 current and former law enforcement witnesses, including the TBI's very own former lead investigator, Terry Dykes.
The determination I made is that he could not have been involved in the kidnapping.
Is it really unusual for law enforcement?
Absolutely, it's unusual. I've never testified for the defense. No, it doesn't happen. Law enforcement guys don't come forward for the defense.
I was wasting my time.
Wasting your time doing what?
Investigating these idiots.
Can you be more specific about these idiots?
Jason Autry, Zach Adams, and Shane Austin, and Dylan Adams. I don't think they're capable of kidnapping a woman and keeping it secret for 2 years. I don't think they're capable of that. I don't think they're capable of doing arithmetic, much less this.
In August of 2012, Terry Dykes had a new supervisor come in, and that supervisor looked at the leads and looked at the way that Terry Dykes was doing that investigation.
Case agent on the case needed to be benched.
Why was he benched?
In my opinion, based on statements he made as well as statements other agents made to me, he had lost his objectivity. He had tunnel vision on a particular suspect and was not objective about all of the facts coming into the case.
I've weighed the information that I had at the time, and I believe I'm objective.
To have the lead case agent who was removed from the case to take the stand and still saying during a murder trial that he still doesn't think that Zach Adams is guilty of this, that's something that's very hard to hear.
Dykes admits he does not know what evidence investigators gathered against Zach Adams and the others after he left.
But you can't tell us anything about the 3 and 4 years after that.
You're right. I don't know what y'all have done since then.
In a murder trial, it's usually the prosecutors pointing fingers, but in this case, the defense attorneys took a turn. They argue Zach Adams is the wrong guy. Somebody else kidnapped and murdered Holly Bobo. That guy, Terry Britt. And you don't have to go far to find him. He's sitting right up there on the witness stand.
Terry Britt, T-E-R-Y-B-R-I-T-T.
Terry Britt was a registered sex offender who lived fairly close to the Bobo home. He lived also very, very close to where some of her property was found later on during the search.
Would you tell the jury what you're currently incarcerated for?
Kidnapping, attempted rape.
Do you have other convictions in your history?
Yes, ma'am. Had a rape charge, a robbery charge.
I got on to him because, number one, he is the exact size of what our witness said the abductor looked like, okay? His history tells me he's capable of kidnapping her.
Do you remember Terry Dykes coming out to talk to you about the disappearance of Holly Bobo multiple times?
Oh, yeah, we all know Dykes, don't we?
Britt's history of rape, kidnapping, and firearms convictions made him such a strong suspect, the TBI got a subpoena to bug his home.
Were you aware that for the first time in the state of Tennessee, they had actually bugged your house?
No, ma'am.
But that extraordinary scrutiny of Britt yields no evidence to warrant an arrest, and he says he has an alibi.
Your wife, Janet Britt, was with you the entire day.
The entire day.
You were never apart from one another.
Never.
I checked his alibi and found out it was garbage.
Why did you think the alibi was garbage?
His cell phone called Janet's cell phone and talked to it for 2 minutes and 56 seconds. His alibi is not true. It's fabricated.
Okay.
Nevertheless, the Brits insist they were together the whole time and their alibi is legitimate.
Terry Dacus called me to go interview Terry Britt, and all Dacus wanted to know was if he is interested in talking about Holly Bobo and working out some kind of deal.
U.S. Marshal John Walker says he visits Britt, who is in prison on an unrelated charge, and lays out how he believed Britt committed the crime.
I said, I know you're a sociopath, I know you have issues with women, and I walked him through what we knew. He interrupted me and looked at me very, very straightforward and said, sounds like you've had it all figured out. I'll plead to it and you can close the case.
Do you remember at one time offering to plead guilty to the murder of Holly Bobo if you could get a 20-year sentence?
No.
So
No.
you're saying that is not...
I'm saying that's a lie.
When I got up to leave, he stood up behind me and he said, if I need to show you something, how long will it take you to get me out of here? He wanted to take me and show me where the remains were at.
And did you relate all of this information to the TBI?
Yes, I did.
And as far as you know, did the TBI go back to follow up with an interview?
They didn't follow up the next few days like I told him that they were probably going to do. That did not happen.
Okay.
Well, I thought the next day they'd get the confession from him and find her remains. And then nothing happened. And I'm like, what do you mean nothing happened?
We asked the TBI about this. A spokesperson said because of the ongoing legal processes, they are not able to answer specific questions, but they remain confident in the investigation.
Did you have anything to do? Anything at all?
No, I did not.
With the abduction of Holly Bobo?
No, I did not.
The rape of Holly Bobo?
No, I did not.
Putting a bullet in the back of her head?
No, I did not, and I wouldn't do that.
All right, you can step in.
Terry Britt leaves the witness stand, not a free man, but never charged in the Holly Bobo case. Now the jury is about to hear from the most compelling kind of witness, one who claims to be an eyewitness to murder. Is this the testimony that could send Zach Adams to death row?
At that time, boom, the gun went off. And it sounded like boom, boom, boom underneath that bridge.
Chilling testimony today in the trial of Zach Adams, one of the men charged in the murder of Holly Bobo.
The prosecution opened up with a somber message to the jurors saying Adams bragged about killing Bobo.
So far, there's no concrete evidence pinning Adams to the crime.
There is no DNA, no fingerprints, no video, no recordings.
His attorney insists the case against Zach Adams is flimsy, largely circumstantial, with little direct evidence connecting him to the crime.
There was no evidence. There's not one single strand of evidence that points to me or anybody, Dylan or Shane or Jason.
In the first 3 days of the state's case, none of the witnesses claimed to have seen Zach Adams with Holly Bobo. But that is about to change. On day 4, the state calls Jason Autry.
Jason Autry, for a long time, said that he was innocent. He had nothing to do with Holly Bobo's abduction, nothing to do with her rape, nothing to do with her murder.
I want to say one thing. I'm innocent of these charges.
I heard you say that earlier.
Right hand before God, I'm innocent, sir.
But then in late 2016, Autry changed his story.
We get a call from Jason Autry's attorney, and he informs us that Jason has been talking to prosecutors and that he's going to be testifying against Zach at trial.
Raise your right hand, please. Solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Yes, sir.
There are witnesses, there are star witnesses, and then there's Jason Autry. From gavel to gavel, the entire fourth day of testimony is all Autry.
When I pulled in, there was a large fire burning in a burn barrel. Dylan Adams was standing at the door of the trailer with his shirt off. Shane was walking around in the yard hollering, "Y'all need to hurry up and get the goddamn hell out of here," with a firearm holstered on the right side.
And just details his entire day on April 13th like it was yesterday.
Autry says Adams tells him later that he and his brother and Shane Austin had kidnapped Holly Bobo and raped her.
He said, "I need you to help me bury this body." He said, "That's Holly Bobo."
Jason Autry testifies that he and Zach Adams brought Holly Bobo here to this long, winding dirt road that runs along the Tennessee River.
Autry says they take the body, which was wrapped in a blanket, and lay it on the ground.
I'm standing over the top of him with my hands on my knees. She being right here. And at that time, I see the foot move, and a sound of distress. It sounded like, come from the blanket. I told him, I said, "This is still alive."
Autry says he keeps a lookout while Zach gets a pistol from the truck.
And at that time, boom, the gun went off. And it sounded like boom, boom, boom. Underneath that bridge, it was just one shot, but it echoed underneath that bridge all the way down that damn river bottom. And when that gun went off, birds went everywhere, just all up under that bridge. And it just dead silence for just a second.
Autry says at that point he hears a boat motor and fears they'll be discovered.
We load the body back into the truck in the same fashion, shut the tailgate. We driving just erratic, panic, just pretty much.
To hear him telling that story.
Anger. What I felt anger, sadness, because I thought he was my friend. Why would he lie on me?
The Bobo family told us in 2017 they believe Zach Adams is responsible for their daughter's murder and that Jason Autry's testimony rang true to them.
It did, and it matched what the prosecutors had also.
My cross-examination of Autry was everything. I mean, it was really important.
The defense attorney points out at the time Autry says the murder happened, he was on phone calls with his girlfriend and also his mother.
In the middle of all this, you were able to take a telephone call from your mother, Shirley King, that morning at 9:42, weren't you?
If your records reflect that, that's true.
Autry also mentions a burn barrel at Shane Austin's house.
55-gallon barrel with all the paint off of it, with flames shooting at the top of it, 3 to 4 foot high.
Shane's mother says there was no burn barrel.
Shane didn't have a burn barrel at his trailer.
Shane's mother also says Jason Autry was wrong about a fence at Shane's trailer.
The gate was open.
No, the driveway did not have a gate at that time. We did put a gate and a fence up, and it was June of 2011 after we bought Shane a puppy.
The prosecution basically adopted Jason Autry's story of what happened, but they left huge gaps in their prosecution, and they don't explain who it was that came and abducted Holly. They don't explain how her body got at that cell tower.
Prosecutors argued at trial that Shane Austin could have been the one who took Holly.
Jason Autry is the best evidence that these prosecutors have in this case because they have very little physical evidence. They're banking on the jury completely, wholeheartedly buying his account.
Inside this courthouse, the jury is about to deliver a verdict. It could be a life or death decision for Zach Adams. Either way, it won't be the end of it.
Years later, a new investigation, another courtroom battle, and prison interviews. What Zach Adams and Jason Autry say now.
I have no reason to.
When the verdict is announced, out of respect for this jury, I will tell you, I want you to contain your emotions. I want there to be no displays.
The jury deliberates 11 hours over 2 days and then finds Zach Adams guilty on all counts in the kidnapping, rape, and murder of Holly Bobo.
When you heard them read the verdict and they said guilty,
It was terrible. It was terrible. Worst day of my life, probably.
There'll never be enough punishment for him.
He don't deserve to be breathing the air that he's breathing today.
Zach Adams avoids a possible death sentence. In a deal with prosecutors approved by the Bobo family, he gets life in prison without parole, plus 50 years.
Who was that a picture of?
That's Holly and myself. That's Holly and her nursing student classmates just a few days before.
Karen Bobo, the woman who taught Zach Adams in the 4th grade, gives him a lesson on heartbreak.
I know that she begged for her life because my daughter loved and enjoyed life. But you chose to take that from her.
Tonight, a man accused of killing and raping Holly Bobo pleads guilty. Dylan Adams pleads guilty to a lesser offense, facilitating murder.
He now faces 35 years in prison without the possibility of parole.
3 years later, Jason Autry pleads guilty to lesser charges related to Holly's kidnapping and murder. And with credit for time served, he is set free.
His testimony was some of the most credible, persuasive testimony I've ever heard given in a courtroom.
The state had to make a deal with the devil to get Zach Adams prosecuted. In my opinion, all 3 of them should be hanging in this big oak tree on the backside of this courthouse.
From his prison cell, Zach Adams has tried and failed over the years to have his conviction overturned. Now, he is trying again.
you hear people say that they're innocent all the time in jail, in prison.
Yeah.
So people are skeptical. What do you say to those people?
He said the person was, what, 5'9", 200 pounds? It wasn't Jason Autry. He's 6'6". Couldn't have been me. I was 6'3", 125 pounds. My brother's 6'2", 125 pounds. The person in the abduction there wasn't one of us. I mean, he didn't match the description of any of us.
A flurry of legal filings beginning January 2024 lay out why Zach Adams says he deserves a new trial and why prosecutors say he does not.
April 2024, a hearing at the Hardin County Courthouse.
The court's going to order that the temporary order placing these exhibits under seal is to remain in effect.
Adams' new attorney is there and some familiar faces, trial prosecutor Jennifer Nichols and the Bobos. Zach Adams is searching for new evidence, new witnesses. He's being helped by Katie Spurko. She's a neuropsychologist and she's been re-examining the case against him.
How did you end up involved in this case?
The attorney who's representing Zach Adams, Doug Bates, is an attorney I've worked with before.
What was he looking for you to do?
He wanted me to review the case file, watch the testimony, and see if there were things that stood out to me in terms of whether someone was being honest or not.
Spurko says she is now working for Zach Adams' mother instead of his attorney.
As psychologists, we are trained on how to interview people to elicit accurate information.
Spurko provided 2020 with interviews she recorded during her investigation.
I want to know everything about you.
I want to be able to look into your soul and know every single thing about you.
I wanted to get a sense for what he was like, because he didn't testify. And I remember the first thing he asked me was if I thought he was innocent. And I said I didn't know yet.
Do you now think he's innocent?
I am so confident he's innocent.
Hi, my name's Katie, and I'm so sorry to come here unannounced. I had your address and I didn't have your phone number.
Spurko looked for more information about former suspect Terry Britt, who was later cleared by the TBI. She went to see his wife, Janet, who still stands by her husband.
There was some evidence that came up with Terry regarding the Holly Bobo situation.
I don't see how, because he didn't have nothing to do with it. There's no way he could have went and kidnapped her. He was here with me. Just because he has a record, that doesn't mean he had anything to do with it.
Some of Katie Spurko's investigating has provoked a reaction from the prosecutor. In a court filing that includes an affidavit from Janet Britt, the prosecutor accuses Spurko of trying to intimidate Britt and of offering to show her confidential discovery files.
Spurko denies she tried to intimidate Britt and says the only files she offered to share were public records of Terry Britt's criminal history. Zach Adams' court filings also say Spurko found a witness who claims she saw Terry Britt behaving oddly the morning Holly was taken.
She said he was in a smaller truck and was kind of leaning over, had made eye contact with her and was leaning over, adjusting his body to block her view of his passenger seat.
Prosecutors say Adams's attorney and Spurko have not gotten a sworn statement from that witness, which they say the law requires before it can be considered.
Still ahead, the effort to free Zach Adams brings Katie Spurko face to face with the person who helped send him to prison.
He said, somebody's got to pay, Jason. He said, is it going to be you? Hell no, I ain't paying.
Forensic neuropsychologist Katie Spurko, now working for Zach Adams' family, has spent nearly a year studying his case file, watching the trial testimony, tracking down and interviewing witnesses. But the person she most wanted to talk to was the man many say sealed Adams' fate, Jason Autry.
Mr. Autry, raise your right hand, please. Solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give.
I found him to be such an engaging witness. And at the same time, there were aspects of his story that were red flags, just impossible.
Dylan Adams was standing at the door of the trailer with his shirt off. Shane was walking around in the yard with a firearm holstered on the right side.
Okay, so this is in 2017, and he's having a recollection. A friend goes around with a firearm, has it holstered on his right side. That's a really specific thing to remember.
That's my testimony, the truth.
There were just a lot of question marks for you.
Yes, he's going through the events of this day, minute by minute almost, with this crazy level of attention to detail and memory. That was a discrepancy that caught my attention.
After being released from prison for his admitted involvement in Holly Bobo's murder, it doesn't take long for Jason Autry to get in trouble with the law again.
Requesting assistance on Morris Road with a subject that has a rifle. Be advised the subject has taken off running.
Well, 2 months later, after they let him out of jail, he gets caught in the neighboring county with a firearm.
Well, breaking news now. The man who served time for the killing of Holly Bobo has been arrested once again, this time in Benton County in a field there.
There he goes, back to jail, and then he's still there to this day.
Autry ultimately pleaded guilty to these new weapons charges and remains behind bars awaiting sentencing in that case.
Back in 2017, Jason Autry told the jury that spellbinding story of what happened to Holly Bobo under the I-40 bridge right here at the banks of the Tennessee River. But what's he saying now? That's what Katie Spurko had to find out if Zach Adams was going to have any hope at all.
My name is Jason Autry.
There you go. Thank you.
When you went to see Jason, what were you hoping was going to come from that conversation?
I was just super curious what he would be like, if he would talk to me, what he would have to say. Can we just start at the very beginning of when he first started getting questioned related to the Bobo case? I asked him, what did you do that day? And he gave me what seemed like a really honest answer.
No, I couldn't tell you what I done that day.
Yeah.
Katie Spurko provided ABC News with this video, and it's the first time it's being seen publicly.
I want to know your whole experience. How did it get from you being arrested for this to you being on the stand and telling this crazy story?
So all of this in the beginning was just all routine questions.
Autry says that when he told his attorney that he intended to fight the charges and go to trial, he got an answer he wasn't expecting.
He said, I got you about a 95% chance. You spend the rest of your time right over. You know, what do they want? You know, I need to know what they want. What do they want from me?
Yeah.
I want you to justify. Straight up about it.
What does he tell you?
Tells me he made the whole thing up. Took the phone records and the case file and put together what he did that day to craft a story that fits in with the evidence that exists and cannot be changed.
I said, well, what if I say all I seen was just a body, you know, laying in the back of the truck? It's not enough to get you out.
Why would someone admit to killing someone if they didn't do it?
He's sitting in jail for years. He's being told that Zach's gonna be telling a story against him, and basically it's this or the death penalty. And so under that amount of pressure, I think a lot of people would have folded the way he did.
And he said, I need you to help me bury this body. And he said, that's Holly Bobo.
You're an engaging witness.
Well, I was trained.
I could tell you were trained. I'm on the witness stand a
trained,
lot.
yeah.
I know. I was trained witness.
Yeah.
Who was doing the training?
Jennifer Nichols.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was the boss of it all.
Zach Adams' defense team made this claim in their legal filing, and we reached out to Jennifer Nichols about it. She denied the allegation, telling us that it is a false statement. The only guidance ever given to Jason Autry was to tell the truth. There was no training.
That's the worst that I've ever felt in my life, coming back, knowing that you just lied and put an innocent man in prison.
Now he has no benefit to be gained other than morally to address the remorse. This isn't helping him whatsoever. He's facing sentencing on federal gun charges.
But it's important to remember that one way or another, Jason Autry is an admitted liar. And prosecutors argue that Autry's recantation should not get Zach Adams a new trial, saying Mr. Autry's credibility was thoroughly impeached during cross-examination at trial and that the jury was aware of inconsistencies in his testimony. They also contend that Autry's testimony was vetted and corroborated.
What do you think of the fact that Jason recanted his confession?
I'm glad. I'm glad he's telling the truth. It's about time. I wish he would have never lied in the first place.
So what does this mean for Zach Adams? Is there a chance Jason Autry's new story could set him free?
A request for a new trial for a man convicted in the 2011 murder of a Holly Bobo.
I mean, so I'm in here for something I didn't do, so I'm hopeful.
This case is a tragedy. There was never a day in that courtroom that I didn't feel for Karen Bobo.
And you have shown absolutely, look at me please, you have shown absolutely no remorse for anything that you have done.
At sentencing, Holly Bobo's mother, there was that very dramatic moment where she wanted to speak to you and look you face to face, eye to eye.
well, she felt like she was talking to the person that took her daughter's life, but she don't realize that I'm not that person. They're the real victims of all this, but they need to know that we didn't have anything to do with it, and if I knew anything, I would have helped any way I could have.
Before this happened to Holly, we lived in what we thought was one of the safest communities. The day that Holly was abducted, not only was something taken from us, it was taken from our whole county, community, and the surrounding counties.
The goal was to get justice for Holly, and I feel like that happened. And obviously it didn't bring her back. There will still be sad, but there is a little peace in knowing that the people that did this to her will be in jail.
But now there are questions about whether one of those people, Zach Adams, will remain behind bars.
A request for a new trial for a man convicted in the 2011 murder of a Holly Bobo.
Zach Adams' team will now need to convince a judge that Jason Autry's new story amounts to new evidence that would have changed the jury's verdict.
Jason Autry recanted his testimony, and that would give Adams an alibi for Bobo's murder.
We reached out to Jennifer Nichols, the prosecutor in this case. She declined our request for an interview, but sent us a statement that says in part, "At trial, we presented proof through 62 witnesses and 250 exhibits. The jurors heard testimony of Zachary Adams' confessions to multiple and unrelated individuals. Today, nearly 8 years after the verdicts, I remain confident in the jury's verdicts of Zachary Adams' guilt."
We understood, when the trial and sentence and everything took place, that there'd be a number of events down through the years. We're going to be patient because we still are seeking justice for our beloved Holly.
Holly was always about helping someone. Whatever Holly did, she put forth her best effort. And it was just in her soul to be that kind, loving, nurturing person.
It's been more than 13 years since Holly's passing, and her legacy still remains. A stretch of Tennessee highway has been dedicated in her honor. And Holly's cousin, country singer Whitney Duncan, recorded a song to honor Holly.
I wanted to convey a message of she's not hurting anymore. She is in a better place. But I know she's watching down and she sees everything. And she is happy.
After Holly's death, the Bobo family established a scholarship in her name for other nursing students.
As for Zach Adams, a hearing is scheduled next month when a judge is going to consider some of his legal filings. That's our program for tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm Deborah Roberts.
And I'm David Muir. From all of us here at 2020 and ABC News, good night.
Please, how can I help? There was a 999 call received from dog walkers that had found a suitcase on a lay-by just near the road.
People came across a suitcase and opened it, and inside was the remains of a person.
Local people found it extraordinary that such an incident could happen here.
For a murder to happen, not only a murder, but a murder on this scale, it was absolutely shocking for the community.
We had knowledge that he had over £270,000 worth of debt, and he was struggling to pay off those debts.
There was blood absolutely everywhere in that room, on the sofa, on the walls and on the ceiling.
Through extreme measures, he used the alternative of planning the murder of his friend.
Tintwistle is an idyllic village nestled on the edge of the Peak District.
Tintwistle is a typical Peak District village. It's got a mixture of beautiful stone cottages. It's on the banks of the Longdendale Valley, and behind it are the Tintwistle Moors, known as the Nar and the Lower Moor. And it has stunning views over the Longdendale Valley and the 5 reservoirs.
A very parochial village where people can leave your back door open, no problems.
In Tintwistle, everyone knows each other. It's a very, neighbourly feel. It's a very close-knit community.
We've got a lot of people who have a lot of very good neighbours, and I think everybody supports each other.
In terms of crime rates in Tintwistle, it's fairly, non-existent.
But all this is about to change when the peace is shattered early one morning.
On the 10th of October, there was a 999 call received from dog walkers that had found a suitcase on a lay-by just near the road.
The location was on a main road that went between Manchester and Sheffield, and it dipped down a little bit into Derbyshire. It was a car park off the main road, but it was an area that was quite popular for walkers.
As you come into Tintwistle from the east, you go along what's called the Woodhead Pass, and this particular suitcase was dumped just over the wall as you go into the village beside the first reservoir.
As I remember, like this people passing by this lay-by and came across a suitcase and opened it, and inside the suitcase was the remains of a person.
Police are immediately dispatched to the area.
There's quite a long drive, really, from the point where I got the call to the point where I arrived at the scene. Just to give you some idea around the geography, when I first got the call, I was in Derby, which is here. The deposition site was all the way to the north of the county, to the north of Derbyshire, and as you can see, it's right at the very tip of the county.
Upon arrival, they are met with a gruesome sight.
It looks like the suitcase has been set on fire, and inside that suitcase we have a body of a man whose head has been removed, whose arms have been removed, and whose feet have been removed.
It was a Samsonite suitcase that was in an extremely charred state, but then it became apparent, and we had a human torso that had been extremely cruelly dismembered and burnt.
As a crime, this is really, really vicious. For somebody to remove all the limbs of a body, never mind commit the murder itself.
Derbyshire Constabulary launch a murder investigation, and news of the horrific find soon spreads around the village.
Oh, like chicken pox. Everybody talks about it, we all know about it. You go in the local shops. Have you heard?
In Tintwistle, it's a really neighbourly community. Everyone knows each other. If there's gossip, someone down the road will know about it in 10 minutes or so. Considering the crime rate was fairly non-existent, for a murder to happen, not only a murder, but a murder on this scale, it was completely shocking for the community.
I think local people found it extraordinary that such an incident could happen here. I think, like all major crimes that happen in what everybody would regard as somewhere quiet and peace-loving, it adds to people's fear that something else could happen, or something else could happen as a result of it.
Police immediately cordon off the crime scene.
The big issue you've got here is around the open. So there's two things. There's the weather. So rain can come and wash away your evidence. But secondly, you've got the issue of privacy. This is a really busy road. There's lots of traffic coming through, and you need to protect the privacy of that individual. That's really important.
Really what you want to do is secure and preserve as much evidence as you can. So there would have been things like identifying where the scene is, making sure that it was cordoned off, that there was enough police officers to ensure that nobody stumbled across the scene.
Beyond the scene, you might be looking at further searches. Has anything discarded, any clothing, any weapons, etc. So this particular point is very important from a forensic point of view. So you would want to be able to get some of your experts down. You want your crime scene manager. You'd really want your pathologist to be coming down to having a look at the scene, just so they have a full understanding of what's here, so that they can do a better job down the line.
And what I would do there is I'd have a discussion with the crime scene manager about the best way of removing the body to a hospital, but also making sure that we didn't lose any evidence while we were in that process, because the evidence that you might lose might be the only evidence that you get that helps you with the case.
Once you start moving a body, then the issue there is a potential loss of evidence, so there'll be some sampling requirements there and then, even in the circumstances where a body's been burnt. For example, there may well be fibres that have been transferred from the offender to the body, or alternatively to the suitcase that haven't been damaged. It's really important to pick those up at that point.
The body is removed, and police focus on one thing.
But I think when you look at the wider picture around this is somebody's life. This is that they've lost, and you know what I really want to do is find out who the family is, who are the relatives and the friends of this individual, and they need informing at the earliest opportunity.
This was going to be a huge challenge for the police now, because there's absolutely nothing to go by. They've just found a torso. There's nothing to identify the person, no fingerprints.
When you're looking at the difficulty presented by not being able to make an identification, the first things that we considered were things like the police database, and then we started looking at people who were missing, but because we had quite a wide geographical area, it was looking at people who were perhaps missing from West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire, Greater Manchester, as well as Derbyshire. But it's an arterial route, could have been from anywhere.
With very little to go on, the pressure is on for the police to try to identify the body.
You head towards the things that you are quite confident that will bring about an identification, but then when the obvious start to go, then it progressively becomes more and more difficult, and you start considering any other locations or any other information that you may get that you think will help you identify who this person was. So it made it a really difficult inquiry where we were having to be very, very precise around the investigative tactics that we used to try and find out who were the people who were involved.
Whilst the police await lab results from the pathologist's examination of the body, their attention turns to other lines of inquiry.
So the first point of call for the police now would have been to conduct local inquiries, asking people if they'd seen anything, if they'd heard anything.
When these things initially happen, all sorts of stories start to abound.
But the question on everybody's lips is, who is the victim?
Foremost in my mind was, there is a family somewhere whose loved one has been murdered, and they don't know about it.
In the picturesque Peak District, police have launched a murder investigation after an unidentified body was discovered in a suitcase which had been set alight.
So the condition of the body when we found it, the head had been removed, both hands had been removed, and the feet had been removed. There were two things that I sort of realised quite quickly. One, that was a deposition site. That wasn't where the murder had taken place. That was where the body had been placed afterwards. And the second thing was, and it was around whether the victim and the offender knew each other. And I took the view that why would one take the steps to hide somebody's identity if they didn't know each other? So I sort of realised in my own mind that if I worked out who the victim was, I would be able to work out who the offender was. And if I worked out who the offender was, I'd be able to work out who the victim was.
Unable to identify their victim, police await the results of the post-mortem.
It's slightly unusual. There was no cause of death. So this tells us that there was no marks or scars or any wounds on the body parts that we had recovered, and clearly the victim's head had been removed. When we looked at the information that we did have from the post-mortem, this was a light-skinned male, and that's all that we were able really to glean from that. From the post-mortem, there were no marks, scars, tattoos or anything that would have assisted us making an identification.
Police trawl the missing persons database for any clues as to who their victim could be.
At the time, there was a lot of missing persons cases, so this could have been absolutely anybody.
There's quite a lot of missing people reported every single day in Derbyshire. And it was a case of refreshing those every single day, because the person may not be reported on day 1 or day 2 or day 3, but every single day going through those the detail of who those individuals were and seeing if we could make a connection between the body that we got and that person who was missing.
With little to go on, Derbyshire Constabulary hold a press conference.
The purpose of today's press conference is to ask for the public's help to identify the victim. We are working with other forces to ascertain whether our victim may have been reported missing in a neighbouring county, but we recognise that he might not have been reported missing at all. We are therefore asking members of the public to come forward if they have not seen a neighbour or a friend or a colleague, or indeed any members of their family recently. A special call centre has been set up to take calls from across the UK, and we are urging people to provide information in relation to this murder investigation.
Information soon starts to filter into the police.
It became apparent that a number of dog walkers had seen the suitcase but hadn't realised exactly what was inside.
So in order to better understand the time frame that we're looking at and understand when the body may have been put in the car park, we did substantial inquiries with people who'd been on the road. We were asking for people who'd got dash cam footage or people that had driven past, and there were a few positive responses out of that, which were able to tell us that the fire had been set late the night before.
With 3 different drivers claiming to have seen a fire around 11:30 p.m. on the 9th of October, officers on the ground can now focus on who was in the area around that time, in a bid to identify the potential killer.
So that was really useful from the initial investigation point of view, to be able to really narrow those timelines so you could concentrate on that time period and work out from there what the offender had done, where he'd been, where he'd likely to travel to and from.
Police now ramp up their inquiries.
There was a bolt out of the blue, and we got a conversation. We got a phone call in from South Yorkshire to inform us that there was actually an ANPR camera on the A628. So the phone call that we got on that day was, do you know you've got an ANPR camera on the 628? And no, we didn't, but thanks very much for telling us, that's really great.
Police immediately trawl through the automatic number plate recognition cameras to establish which vehicles had passed through the area on the night in question.
The police followed ANPR camera footage and located a Mercedes vehicle that triggered the camera just after 11 o'clock on Sunday the 9th, the evening before, and then didn't actually make it all the way across Woodhead Pass Road and to trigger the other ANPR camera at the other end.
It was the only vehicle that passed in the window of opportunity. So every other vehicle only went in one direction, either towards Manchester or towards Yorkshire.
All the vehicles, over 200 that had travelled along that road within the time period, down to one that had turned around and returned back to the Manchester area.
That was a strong indication that that vehicle was the one that deposited the body here on the night of the 9th.
After 10 days of round-the-clock investigations, and still having no clue as to the identity of their victim or suspect, this discovery is key.
The Mercedes triggered the camera on the evening before between 23:09 and 23:26. So straight away that was something I was very interested in, and we started to make some inquiries as to who might be the owner and what might be the significance of that vehicle.
This was absolutely key in the investigation. After 10 days of not finding anything, they needed to find out who this silver Mercedes belonged to.
As it happened, the vehicle didn't have any insurance, and so there was a reason to go and stop it and speak to the driver and have a look at the vehicle.
After further investigation, police discover that the vehicle is registered to someone living in Manchester.
So the owner of the vehicle was somebody called Ming Jiang.
Once the vehicle had been identified, it was registered to Ming Jiang, and therefore this triggered for the police to monitor him, make inquiries as to where he lived, inquiries of where he went.
There was so much pressure on the police. At this point in the investigation, it was very time sensitive. After 10 days, they really needed to find this person. At this point, the person who committed the crime could have run away, they could have covered up, or they could have very much so committed again.
Initial inquiries reveal Ming Jiang lives in Manchester, so Derbyshire Constabulary enlist the help of their colleagues over there.
When Greater Manchester Police assisted us, they were able to locate the vehicle, and because it was driven without any insurance, we were able to seize it. And when we seized the vehicle, we were then able to forensically examine it. And what I was looking for in that forensic examination was to find any evidence that might link to the body that we've got and the scene that we'd preserved some days before.
The police found a speck of blood in the rear that was the size of a 10p coin.
This was a really, really big moment in the investigation. What I would be looking to find out there is a blood spot in the boot of the vehicle the same as the blood that we found at the scene. So the DNA was sent away for comparison. It was the longest 24 hours I can imagine. Eventually it came back, and it came back with the news that we were really hoping for, and that was that the blood in the boot matched the DNA of the blood at the scene.
The blood match in the boot of the car puts Ming Jiang at the forefront of the investigation.
I felt this was the first time we were getting a breakthrough, and first time we were getting an indication as to what may have taken place here. So as soon as we got the positive information about the DNA hit, it was a case of let's get this person arrested at the earliest opportunity.
So Ming Jiang was arrested on the 20th of October. They'd attended a casino in Manchester where they believed he was, and he was arrested at that location.
Now that the police have Ming Jiang in custody for questioning, time is of the essence to find evidence linking him to the murder.
What is also part of the inquiry is to start doing an evidential search around him to understand where he lived, what his movements were, and whether there was any other evidence that we'd be able to glean from his home address.
The police searched the home address, and they found bloodstains all over the carpet. There was blood dispersion across all of the walls. They had been painted over, and quite a shoddy clean-up had taken place. It was an extensive clean-up, but there was still blood throughout the flat and in the bathroom.
There was traces of blood absolutely everywhere that weren't immediately apparent to the eye. But there were things like the blood had seeped through the laminate flooring. There was blood that was soaked into the cushions on the sofa. There was blood on the walls and on the ceiling.
So the scene was a really rich source of evidence for us. The main evidence we got were 2 finger marks in blood. So we got one under a table. The evidence you're really looking for there is the offender's fingerprint in the victim's blood, and getting that in 2 places was very, very critical evidence.
At this point, it's absolutely safe for the police to say that the murder took place in this apartment.
Days into the investigation of the body in the suitcase found in a Derbyshire village, police have discovered a car linked to the murder and have made an arrest.
A forensics team investigated the car. They swabbed the blood. This matched the torso that was found in the suitcase. So at this point, the police were then able to arrest Mr. Ming Jiang.
Forensic tests reveal the blood on the torso in the suitcase is a match for the blood in Jiang's flat in Manchester, making Ming Jiang their #1 suspect.
So the investigation moved over to Manchester because it became clear from the Derbyshire point of view that the offence had actually taken place in Manchester. As a result of their inquiries, that took them to the flat at Falconwood Way in Beswick. And as a result of what they found there, they felt very strongly that that was actually the place of the murder. And so as a result of that, that would then become a Manchester investigation.
But police are no closer to identifying their victim.
So as the inquiry goes on, the stress and the pressure builds. As a senior investigating officer, it's a privilege to do that role. But you do take the responsibility of having to investigate the death of somebody, and you owe that responsibility to the family of the victim. So I was really concerned about finding out who that was and getting that information to them at the earliest opportunity.
However, searches of their suspect and his car have led to a discovery.
When we did the evidential search of the Mercedes vehicle, we found some banking documents of another person called Yang Lu.
He had certain possessions on his person. At the time, he had his passport, he had his bank cards.
And that led us to an address in Salford at Media City. And there were some lines of inquiry that we needed to conduct at that address and find out what the relationship was with this person and how they fitted into the inquiry.
Police immediately sent officers to Yang Lu's address.
There was no answer, it was nowhere to be seen by anybody. So I made the decision that we were going to force entry into that apartment and find out really who this person was. So we forced entry into the address at Media City. Nothing particularly remarkable about the address, but what it did allow us to do was take some items from there which we knew the owner of that apartment would have left their DNA on. So very quickly we were able to send that away for analysis.
Finally, there is a breakthrough. Results come back matching Yang Lu's DNA to the torso, as well as the blood found in Ming Jiang's flat and car. Almost 2 weeks after the discovery, police have the name of their victim.
So what we did find out was that Yang Lu was a 27-year-old male, originally from China.
Yang Lu came to the UK in 2000 to study, where he went to the University of Leeds. His family actually worked really, really hard to save money so that he could study in the UK and achieve his goals and his dreams.
He finished his master's degree, and after that he stayed here and become a shares and stock trader.
He'd not brought any of his family with him over here, so if you look at the reasons why he may not have been reported missing, his family simply didn't know that he wasn't where he should have been.
Police now have the harrowing task of informing their victim's family.
This was a really difficult case from a family point of view. Under normal circumstances, we'd want to inform the family in person. And in the end, we actually had to make the call to the family in order to inform them. That's something that we wouldn't normally do under any circumstances, but unfortunately with the distance involved, we had no other option. I arranged for contact through Interpol with the Chinese authorities in order to let the family know. In the meantime, we allocated family liaison officers in order that we could make the process as smooth as possible.
Yang's family were absolutely devastated when they found out, their only son had been murdered. Not only murdered, but in such a vicious way.
And then they arrived in the UK in the second week of November.
Yang was very close to his family. They spoke on the phone near enough every single day. He actually vowed to go back to China and look after his family if one of them was to fall ill. And I think that just shows the tight-knit relationship they have, because he'd built himself this fantastic life in the UK and he was really willing to give that up to go back and look after his family.
When the family was here, then I helped them in different ways because they can't speak English. So most of the time that if they have something do not understand about the police procedure, and I help to explain them.
They were completely grief-stricken. They had lost their only son, who had come to the United Kingdom to study at university. He was a very clever young academic man and a very bright young man, and they were deprived of their son.
With time running out to hold their suspect in custody, police need to work fast to build enough evidence to charge him.
Ming Jiang is a danger to the public, and we would really want to be in a position where he'd be charged at that point. The secondary issue is he's a big flight risk. We'd be worried about him kind of moving back to China or elsewhere.
We had to prove that he was the person that had committed that murder. We knew he was involved and could prove that to the extent, and we then had to build a case.
There's no doubt that Ming Jiang tried to cover his tracks quite extensively, but the problem is there was just too much evidence. The evidence there in particular was extremely strong. It's almost the best evidence you can find at a scene, which was Yang Lu's blood and Ming Jiang's fingerprint.
Police now believe Ming Jiang murdered Yang Lu in his flat, dismembered his body, and dumped his torso in a suitcase before setting light to it. But they need to work out the link between the pair and establish when the murder happened, so trawl CCTV footage in the days leading up to the discovery of the suitcase.
CCTV footage revealed a man getting off the tram in Manchester. He crossed the road to meet another man and they went in the direction of a flat in Beswick.
That tram stop was the closest one to where Ming Jiang's home address was.
The male he met up with perfectly fit the description of Ming Jiang. And in addition to that, we had telephone evidence that showed the two phones of Ming Jiang and Yang Lu came together. And interestingly, from that point onwards, the phones always remained together. And that was the very last time that Yang Lu was seen.
With the evidence building, police make a decision.
So I authorised one charge of murder.
Ming Jiang denies any involvement in the murder, so the police and prosecution need to build a case for trial and establish a motive, meaning they have to delve deeper into the lives of the two men.
Yang Lu was definitely a responsible young man. He invested in stocks and shares, and he knew how to make money. He was very clever in that sense. He'd built himself this brand new life in the UK. He really had a bright future ahead of him. Yang really enjoyed gambling. He was a very big gambler. He'd go to casinos quite often. He always gambled within his means, though. He was never irresponsible in that respect. Even though he had the money to gamble, he never went above and beyond.
So Ming Jiang was in a very different situation to Yang Lu. Ming Jiang was originally from China. He moved over to the UK. He lived in the Beswick area in North Manchester. He rented that flat. At the time of the murder, he really was in serious debt problems. He'd spent quite a long time at casinos. He was a regular gambler. In fact, so much so that he had VIP status.
We believe that they met in a casino when they share the same interest to gamble. They met in a Manchester casino.
But Yang Lu could never have imagined that their relationship could be so deadly.
Ming Jiang was very well known in the casino community. In some casinos, he had quite specialised status due to the large amounts of money that he was gambling. Yet in other casinos, he had markers on him due to his erratic and volatile behaviour. It was my understanding that he was a great fun guy to be around when he was winning, but it was a very, very different case when he was losing.
He lost a huge amount of money, and as far as we know, is sort of a £200,000 debt, and he's been chasing by the debtor, the creditor within the community.
It was the Crown's case that Ming Jiang had accrued extensive debts. We had knowledge that he had historically acquired over £270,000 worth of debt within 2 casinos. He was struggling to pay off those debts. We knew that he had pawned some wristwatches for over £15,000 to try and keep the debtors at bay.
Getting more and more desperate to pay off his debts, it appears Ming Jiang hatched an evil plan.
Ming Jiang was in huge amounts of debt. He had no income or wherewithal with which to repay that debt, and the only way he believed he could do that was either through his addiction of gambling and waiting for the big win, or through extreme measures. He used the alternative of planning the murder of his friend.
When the police found Ming Jiang, he was actually in possession of Mr. Yang Lu's passport and his bank cards. So at this point, it's safe to assume that he was trying to assume his identity.
So Ming Jiang had taken Yang Lu's life and then he took his identity. He basically used all his personal information in order to extract money through his bank cards. He even tried to sell his flat, and he was making good progress on that at the point at which he'd been arrested. There was nothing that he wouldn't do in order to extract as much money and value out of.
In Manchester, Ming Jiang's trial for the murder of Yang Lu begins.
So the trial was conducted in April of 2017. Shortly prior to the trial hearing, we did meet with the victims' parents, and we had to reassure them that we would do our utmost to be able to obtain justice for their son.
The court hears how Ming Jiang had a checkered history.
Ming Jiang was a Hong Kong national. Before he came to the UK, he was working as cabin crew for a German airline, where he was actually convicted for credit card fraud.
The police found that he had convictions in Germany for shoplifting, convictions for identity fraud and forgery of documents in Switzerland. He had convictions for credit card fraud in Scotland. So as a result of that, as the reviewing lawyer, it was my job then to write international letters of request. I had to make formal requests to Germany and Switzerland to obtain evidence of those convictions, which we then subsequently at the trial hearing submitted as evidence of bad character.
The prosecution believes Ming Jiang was planning to use his experience of identity fraud to build a new life for himself.
It appeared quite clearly that Ming Jiang understood his way around the financial system, and the kind of things that he did and the way that he adopted the identity, for example, by using Yang Lu's phone to contact banks, etc. That showed quite a little bit of knowledge of how to basically defraud and use identity theft to his advantage.
This was premeditated, it was planned. He had devised a plan as to how he was going to assume his victim's identity and obtain all of his assets and walk away. He was probably going to walk away from his debts, take what money he could get from his victim and return to China. I believe that would have been his plan.
The motive behind the murder was quite clearly greed. It was obvious that Ming Jiang understood that Yang Lu had a lot of money. He lived in a nice area of Manchester, he owned his own flat, he dabbled in stocks and shares, and the contact that they'd had together, we believe that there would have been some understanding from Ming Jiang's point of view that Yang Lu was pretty wealthy.
During the trial, Ming Jiang's story changes several times.
Ming Jiang showed no remorse whatsoever throughout the whole process. He came out with bizarre and incredulous accounts, changing the overall story on a number of occasions. Initially, he claimed that Yang Lu was an escort and that they were in a relationship. There was absolutely no evidence to support that.
So he wasn't consistent in his account that he was providing to the police. He did pursue that through to the trial hearing and maintained that it was a different Chinese male called Mr. Wong who had committed the act of murder, and he tried to distance himself by using this fictional character.
He later on claimed that there was a kind of third-party gangster-type individual who was involved that Yang Lu owed money to. Again, from an investigation point of view, we were able to show that that simply wasn't the case.
Ming Jiang fabricated Mr. Wong, and he gave the phone number to the police. However, when the police checked the record of the phone, and it's find out that the phone number is only create a date before they believed Liu Yong died.
So all the explanations that Ming Jiang provided were easily discounted and showed that he was just making things up as he went along.
The jury has shown CCTV from the night police believe Yang Lu was murdered, in a bid to prove that Ming Jiang was the last to see him.
The evidence we used, we had a digital sequence of events that displayed all of the CCTV footage and the appropriate stills. So we had the stills showing that Ming Jiang was friends with the victim and that they had attended the casino together on the 3rd of October. And then subsequently, Ming Jiang had clearly lured him to his flat on the 5th of October, and we had a still digital photo of Yang Lu leaving the Metrolink tram stop at Velo Park, which was the closest one to Ming Jiang's home address.
From a CCTV point of view, that was the last point at which Yang Lu had been seen, so that was on the 5th of October.
So his movements shortly after the time that we believe that he had killed Yang Lu, he used the bank cards that he'd acquired. He used them at B&Q to purchase cleaning products, paint with which to paint the flat. He went to the petrol station on numerous occasions, and he was seen to be filling one, if not two, containers of petrol, which we then subsequently believe that he used to set the body on fire.
Having killed his supposed friend and made attempts to clean the evidence, it appears Ming Jiang goes back to doing what he loves best.
In the early hours of the 6th of October, Ming Jiang spent 30 minutes at the casino. He also spent time at the casino after the deposition. So in the early hours of the 10th of October, he spent around 4 hours. And if you can imagine, he literally just taken the torso of the body, he's dumped it up in Tinswhistle, and then he set it on fire, returned back to his flat, and the first thing he does is head to the casino to spend Yang Lu's money and gamble.
His actions aren't the actions of what you would expect a normal person to do, and it's a terrible thing to murder somebody, but then to murder somebody and dismember the body and then dump it and set on fire, it's just an incredibly callous act, and it probably speaks a lot about his character.
After hearing the evidence, the jury retires to consider its verdict.
So the jury in this case sat for 4 weeks, and under normal circumstances, you generally expect around about a day's deliberation per week. So under normal circumstances, it would take 4 days to come to a decision. But in this case, it only took them 4 hours, and that shows you really how overwhelming the evidence was.
After weeks of evidence is a very short period of time, and I believe would demonstrate that they were absolutely sure in a very short space of time that Ming Jiang was guilty of this offence.
At the point that they gave their verdict, Ming Jiang was completely emotionless. He showed nothing at all. At that point, he went back into custody, and sentencing took place a week later. The judge actually sentenced him in his absence because he refused to come to court.
The presiding judge made a point of stating that the starting point for a sentence would be 30 years, due to it being solely the sole purpose being for gain, and in this case for money. However, he outlined aggravating features such as the extensive dismemberment of the body, the complete lack of remorse, and the misleading of evidence, and he made a point of saying that it might be that the authorities never deem him to be safe to be returned to the community, and that he could spend the rest of his life in prison.
On the 2nd of May, 2017, Ming Zhang is sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 33 years. He has never revealed the whereabouts of Yang Lu's limbs or head.
The saddest thing about this murder is Ming Zhang's greed caused the loss of the life of a young 36-year-old man, leaving behind two very grief-stricken, distraught parents.
His family didn't know the last time they spoke to him on the phone, the last time they saw him in person, was going to be the last time. I think, yeah, it's really devastating that they never got to say goodbye to their only son.